Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips.
Hello listeners, welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley. My name is Dr. Lesley Phillips and I am your host. And I'm joined in the studio today, as usual, by Corey.
Hello and welcome to the most eclectic radio station I've ever worked with. It's amazing. Everything from Polish reggae to hard rock. And everything in between, including us.
And metaphysics and spirituality, which of course is what our show is all about. So if you're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth for the first time, you're in for a treat. You're in for our weekly exploration of the intuitive, the mystical, and the spiritual.
We even started on time this week.
Yeah, and you, if you want to, this is a talk show, so you're welcome to phone us up and join in the conversation. Usually what we do is we have a topic of the week or a guest that we interview for the first part of the show.
I know which it is this week. I know which it is. I think we have a guest.
We do have a guest. That's right. And then, of course, we open the phone lines for you listeners to call in and ask your questions. So our phone line is 604-504-7441, extension 4142. And you can also email us if you're a bit shy to info@drlesleyphillips.com. And we welcome your discussion topics, and if you want to join in what we've been talking about on the topic of the week, or you can phone and get an intuitive insight on one of your life questions, whether it's the area of career, money, health, life purpose, or your own spiritual experiences. So, with no further ado, let me introduce the topic of the week. And Corey's correct. We actually have a guest on the show this week.
Amazing guest on the show this week.
And our guest is going to talk to us about our daily appreciation of the gift of life. So he hopes to heighten our focus on spirituality in a different way by getting us to think about life and our mortality and what a gift it is for us to be able to enjoy our lives each day.
I'm just thinking about that today, actually.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that subject this week, so it's kind of interesting that that's what we're going to talk about. So he hopes that you're going to think more deeply about your own beliefs about death, and because it's not a morbid topic to avoid, but an extension of life.
And he's going to have all the answers, right?
Well, he might just help lead us into the mystery of it. Yeah, because he says that no living person is able to describe the experience of death, which is true, because even those near-death experiences, how do we really know that is what happens when you die, because those people actually didn't die.
I hope he's not hearing me, because there'll be a lot of pressure for him.
So anyway, without further ado, I'll tell you who our guest is. He is an author called Charles Allen Livingstone. He goes by Alan, and he lives in Las Vegas in Nevada. And we're going to talk to him about his debut novel, which is called Gabriel's Creek. And it is a spiritual journey that the hero in the novel is going through. And so we're gonna ask him all about that and find all about that story and how it helps us understand our own mortality and question and appreciate our own lives. And Alan he's written a memoir and other books as well, and he is somebody who's been through some significant life-changing events, which we're also going to ask him about, including Hurricane Katrina and a cancer diagnosis. And he was born in Texas, but now he lives in Las Vegas. And he's going to have 3 novels that are going to be released in the next few months. So that's pretty prolific, really. So welcome to the show, Alan. Oh. Welcome to the show, Alan.
I think Corey told me I'm supposed to say, hi, that's me, or hello, that's me. Hello, that's me.
Well, welcome to the show, Alan.
Good to be with you.
Oh, good. I introduced you, and then I didn't press the button for you to be able to speak, which is not very clever, is it?
Be careful. She's got a button there, Alan.
That's right. No swearing on the show.
The first night you do this is always tough. I understand.
So, Alan, tell us a bit more about Gabriel's Creek and why our listeners would want to have a read of Gabriel's Creek. Tell us more about it.
Gabriel's Creek is a novel about life, the living of it, and the reflection on it by a middle-aged man who's surprised to learn an illness will take his life soon. He has both the blessing of knowing his end is near and the dilemma of what to do with the time he has left. He decides 2 things are crucial. No spoiler alert here. He has to see his only grandchild, and he has to play 1 more round of golf. That sounds kind of crazy, but there's 2 things he wants to accomplish. But beyond that, he also has that anxiety of not knowing what's coming, just like you touched on. How will death come? As he walks his final 18 holes through his own sanctuary, that is an unknown, unlisted golf course, he wrestles with how he has lived his life and how he has or has not treasured his relationships. He realizes the value of living each day as the gift it truly is, has escaped him until now he knows it's over. Now, the both of you mentioned that these things have kind of gone through your mind the last few days. I think they go through our mind more and more, let's just say as time goes on. But he wrestles with the knowledge that despite it being something just like you said, every living thing must experience and has for all time, no one can say how death will come, and he wonders about that. Features some may call time travel occur through his round in this novel. The main character is brought to face times of his life when another decision may have taken him a different direction. He's playing around the golf by himself, and suddenly he's running into people he hasn't seen in years and years. They bring up situations that he had faced. He goes through a whole lot of the what if this, what if that, what if. You know, the what if thing is something we all say we'll never do. But I call it it's much like the atheist in the foxhole. Events have a tendency to make you see things in a way you may never have before.
Very true.
So, there's no atheist in a foxhole. The end of the round marks the end of much more, and we wonder if Gabriel's Creek Golf Course is of our earthly world, one beyond, or somewhere in between. Now, I have to say, while I'd love to focus on the fact the most interesting part of this novel for your audience may be the last few chapters, we're not giving away the whole thing. But that's pretty much it. I think between the cover and the synopsis and my telling you just what that is, I think you get a whole lot of concern about, oh, good heavens, this is a golf book. I would say not.
I guess there's I'm not a big golf fan, so I guess for me there would be nothing more boring than watching a game other than maybe reading a book about golf.
Exactly.
Cricket.
But, it's funny. There was a review just the other day. There was an Amazon review, unsolicited testimonial. Okay, be honest, she gave it 4 stars instead of 5. But she indicated that even though she's not a golfer, because she wasn't a golfer and had no interest whatsoever in golf, maybe there was a little too much golf in it for her. But to be quite honest, there's a lot more reviews and a lot more comments I get that say this is not a golf book. I like to say that golf is the vehicle that tells the story, but it does bring us to what may be a very important point about the book. And Corey, you may be the perfect person to point this at. Whether you find yourself what we would call, and your listeners would think of as spiritual or not, I contend we all have our sanctuaries. For some, it's fly fishing. For others, it's quilting. For some, it's hiking through the snow of majestic mountain peaks. For others, it's cooking. Some people, for them, it's flying or riding horses or jigsaw puzzles. For some, it might even be a giant cathedral, a chapel of a church. I think you get the point that we all have the places where we go for introspection. What is a sanctuary? Every dictionary definition I've seen includes a mention of a church or a part of it. But what really is a sanctuary for the soul? Where can we go for introspection, to seek peace with our inner being, to meet with ourselves, to breathe deeply, to gain the intuition we need to deal with the puzzles of our life? For me, and therefore for the author of Gabriel's Creek, the natural beauty that combines with the architectural challenge of a golf course is that sanctuary. And for some I think you'd find would admit that is the case. As such, it was the perfect setting for what the main character faces. It's true, I've found people who play or are even familiar with golf love that aspect of Gabriel's Creek. And personally, it's one thing I enjoyed in the writing of the book. But to call me a golfer is not necessarily accurate. It might be a rung on the ladder above you, Corey, but I'm closer to being a golfer than I am a hockey player. But I love hockey. So I don't have to be a golfer to love golf. I don't have to be a hockey player to love hockey. You know what I mean?
Well, Dr. Lesley loves cricket, don't you, Dr. Lesley?
Well, actually, yeah, I don't mind it, because I grew up with cricket, so and British football.
Exactly. I have a son-in-law who lives in Alabama, who comes from Minnesota, who lived out. Well, he had to live out here for a little while because that's how he caught my daughter. But his world revolves around rugby. Huh? My point being, here's an American who thinks rugby is the center of the universe. So for him, that floats his boat. So different things do different things for different people.
So Alan, I'd like to ask you a bit more about Gabriel's Creek, if I may, because it fascinates me what he must be going through internally, finding out that he's about to die. And you mentioned that part of his journey around this golf course is he's doing a life review. He's reflecting on his life, and he's looking back at what he's accomplished, and he's also looking back at his regrets. And so I'm sure that's what anyone who's given that kind of a diagnosis, that must be part of what they go through. So I wanted to ask you about that questioning that he's doing and that reflection back on his life. And maybe there's even things that he wished he'd done that he never did. And the second question I wanted to ask you is, when he's going back and he's looking at, well, I made that choice then, and that resulted in these particular things happening, does he get to see what would have happened if he'd made a different choice in the book?
Well, that's a good question, and the second part of that I'll take first. Short answer, no. I felt like that's something that's been done, and it didn't really fit what I was trying to accomplish. I think because some of it, albeit you'll before we're done, you'll get a kick out of how the whole thing came about. But be that as it may, part of that whole experience, that experience which I knew absolutely nothing about before I wrote it, but I know a whole lot about now. We'll get into that. Is it doesn't matter the what ifs. You do the what ifs. What if I'd have done this? What if I'd have done that? What if I had not accepted? Keep in mind this is fiction, and I'm talking about the character, not me. What might I have done differently when I found out my wife was cheating on me? What might I have done differently with a business rival to whom it was suggested to me he could be taken care of? What might I have done with a friend who had been my closest friend on earth who, let's say, hosed me big time on a business deal? It's part of the natural order of things to think of what might have happened, but the character doesn't dwell on that. He doesn't see it as in the Ghost of Christmas. Let's see, what would that be? Past? Yeah. Christmas is coming. So no, there is not that flyover vision of looking down to see that alternate reality. Alternate reality. We have a lot of that in the United States right now, so I don't know why that term came to me, but I digress. He is more like a round of golf. And again, this was part of the motivation for using a round of golf. You got to just keep moving. You got to just keep moving. You just go on. One thing about golf that relates to what he's going through, and again, Corey, I'm sensitive to you now. I'm feeling you about this whole golf thing. Okay, so I appreciate. But you can't dwell on what just happened. You just, you do all this thing, you line up and you pick the right club, and I'm going to hit it this far, I'm just going to go over there, and the next shot's going to be this. And then, woof, it goes off the toe, and it goes about 20 feet over there, and now I'm up against the fence. So, So I can, as many people do, get mad, flip club, break club, stomp my feet, all that. It doesn't change what you're facing now.
So what you've just described, what you've just described is a mindfulness practice of being in the present moment. Just being in the present moment. What's the next shot I'm going to take? What's the next step I'm going to take without projecting into the future or the past? And that's a really powerful way to hold your consciousness.
A real focus. I mean, it's total focus. Yeah.
Well, it's total focus in the game, but in life, when the clock is ticking, and I'm trying to make it through this 4 hours, 2 hours, 10 minutes, 30 seconds. And it literally does get like that. I would share with you when it comes down to cases. If I can, let me just jump ahead, and you step on my toe if I go too far. But perhaps a better analogy. My hurricane.
Well, I wanted to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I wanted to ask you about the some of the experiences that you've had in your life, like the hurricanes and so on. But it might be a good idea for us to do that after the break, because we're heading up 10 seconds from a break now. So what we'll do is we'll listen to the ads, and then we'll come back and ask you all about that.
And when we come back, don't be so shy, okay?
You normally have quiet people like me on here.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley. My name is Dr. Lesley Phillips, and I am your host. And tonight's topic has been about facing our mortality. And we have a guest who has been telling us about his latest book, which is called Gabriel's Creek. And it is about a man who finds out that he has a cancer diagnosis. And what happens to him from that point onward. So we've been exploring that subject with Alan. And before the break, he was about to tell us about some experiences that he himself has had in facing death. And I know that there's a couple of topics that we can explore with you here, Alan. But I believe that did you go through Hurricane Katrina?
Yes, we lived on the water on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico in Biloxi, Mississippi. Nice big house where we raised 3 kids who had moved on to college and other things by then. But we lived there for over 10 years. Anytime you live on the coast, hurricanes are part of life. They happen. They happen all the time. You cannot buy a house on the water where one of the largest hurricanes to ever hit anybody in 1969 hit and be all mad when the house is gone. But yes, we lived on the Gulf Coast where we'd lived many years, large house, and we lost everything we ever owned in our life, including every stick of a 4,000 square foot house down to the slab.
Wow.
But just for plenty of clarification on Gabriel's Creek, he had some other illness. I'm the one with the cancer. But who cares? I got a son-in-law that thinks that the son-in-law in the book is him when it was written before I knew him. So we're good. No big deal. I haven't had the heart to tell him. I just want him to sweat. But yes, I haven't written about our Hurricane Katrina experience, at least not the book that those few months are worthy of. As we lived the months following the storm, I felt this was a story that had to be told, and that this would be the book I always felt I could write. The more disasters happen, like the one you had at Fort McMurray, like we've had in the United States since Katrina, especially this year's busy hurricanes this season, like in Mexico with the earthquakes, that anybody in the West is going to deal with at some point.
Yeah.
The fires in the West, like we're all going to have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of guests that write in about their problems and their difficulties and their challenges, and we've noticed an increase in people writing to us about just all of the horrific disasters that are happening every time you switch on the news or read the newspaper, and people are having challenges coping with it. Had a lady write this week she can't sleep because she's worrying about what's going on in the world. So having been someone that's actually been at ground zero, right in the middle of a huge natural disaster, what can you say to help people who haven't been through it but who are really worried about it?
I would say the same thing about disasters as I would say about health issues. Again, so far we're both in my wheelhouse. As I would say about a lot of things in life, and that is, I can guarantee you that no matter how bad you think you've got it, I promise you somebody else is doing a lot worse than you are. And in the case of Katrina, in our case, Okay, well, first thing is you find out what's important. You find out, you stop yourself for a second and identify what's important. Is it that picture of my mother and Mickey Mouse that we took at Disneyland in 1980 with it, whatever? Yeah, I miss that. I miss that. I want that. But you better worry about getting water today. Geez, what about all those pictures that and my dad, after my mom died, I went and met him in Taiwan, and we did all this stuff together and had all these pictures, and geez, I want all those. Yeah, well, sorry, but we got to find some food. What about my wife's jewelry, and what about the kids' soccer videos, and what about the trophies and the cheerleading pictures and well, I want those and I wish I had those, but you know what? It's getting cold and it's raining, so I think I better find some clothes. I can tell you we evacuated before the storm. People say, oh, that was smart. No, it was a mandatory evacuation area. My house sat at 11 feet. We had storms before that the water had come up very close. Okay, so we evacuated. Well, I got 2 dogs. Guess what? There's no discussion. I don't have any more, but I did. There's no discussion. The dogs are going with. So, come on, let's go. We evacuate as the storm approaches. I had to find some place because you knew it was going to be bad. So you got to find a hotel. Had to find a hotel that would take 2 dogs, which in 2005 was a little different. So 450 miles later, which took 15 hours to drive on the freeway, that'll tell you something about how many people were trying to go to the same place. We wound up in South Georgia in time to see landfall of the hurricane on television. Everything's talking about New Orleans. Everything's talking about New Orleans. Well, anyone that deals with hurricanes, and you hear it a lot now, if you're on the west side of the eye, things are generally less powerful. The eye went between New Orleans and us. New Orleans had a different problem, but I don't care how. You can't say any way that you lose everything you ever owned and you have to fight for water and ice and food and clothing and what happened to my job place got destroyed and on and on and on. It doesn't matter whether you had 5 miles an hour with the wind or 200 miles an hour with the wind. If you had 20 feet of water come into your house, it doesn't matter whether the house is still there or not. We used to tell people, I've always told people, we actually had it better than if our house had been left standing. Because if your house is left standing, like look at the people in Houston and in Florida, they have to deal with rot. They have to deal with reconstruction. They have to deal with a lot of things we didn't have to. We didn't have anything. We did a daily scavenger hunt and go and look for things. And, once in a while you'd find a photograph half a mile away or something. But when we didn't know, you see where your house is on the radar, you know it's going to be bad. It's 2 days later before we hear from our son, one of our sons who got in over there and said, I can't find the house. What do you mean you can't find the house? So that was the first time that it really kind of hit you, and it kind of wrestles with your emotions. You cry, and you realize, well, that didn't do me any good. We fight our way back. We go, a week later is when we're first allowed by the military to get to our property. We get there and you pull in. I got the dogs in the car with me, and the dogs are looking at me like I didn't have anything to do with this. Because there was nothing standing at all for probably 2 miles from our house. I mean, I had a subdivision of 72 homes, but there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing there. Hey, look, I think that's my washing machine. Oh, maybe it's not. Hey, look, I think that's my bicycle. Oh, maybe it's not. Hey, look, that might be my riding lawnmower. Might belong to somebody else. Okay, so you go around and okay, so now let's try getting mad. I'm going to get mad. I'll be mad at somebody. Okay, what'd that do for you? Doesn't do anything. Okay, well, now what? So you go through these emotions to finally come to the realization that you just got to deal with it. And I can stop right there and say, what if my health had been what it became several years later? What if we had invalid parents living with us? What if we had infant children? What if we had the grandchildren that I have now that I don't have? And I mean, we were lucky. We were lucky. We were alive. You know, on the one hand, we look at the devastation that we see that continues to build and happen, and like this year has seen so much of. And we kind of, on the one hand, we say, well, hey, I see stuff, I see things standing. That's good. And then we realize, oh, no, it's not. It's not really a good thing. So, I mean, we have the kind of, that, you know, as it relates to spiritual, as it relates to a lot of what your listeners are interested in, okay, you're walking around your property. We had put our house on the market like 2 weeks before the storm. I found the for sale sign. I did stick it in the ground and took a picture and wrote reduced across it, but that's the comical side of it, and we'll just move along. It's true, but so walking around the property, so we had, like I said, 3 kids who had all gone off to college. They were in Mobile, Alabama, which is nearby. But it had been, when I grew up, my mother was a piano teacher and played organ and piano in churches and all that. She had a degree in music from Baylor University. She, blah, blah, blah. She was, to me, she was a concert pianist. I don't know. She could play the piano. She had a lot of sheet music and a lot of hymnals. But I didn't have it. I didn't have any of that. I don't know. Somebody give me a map. How far is it from Fort Worth, Texas to Biloxi, Mississippi? It's a long way. So I'm walking through my yard where the fences are all gone and the buildings are all gone and everything's gone. My pier was still there where I had a little dock. And I come up on a hymnal laying in my yard.
Huh, interesting.
A hymnal that is laying open. And the hymnal is laying open to a hymn. I should have studied before. I didn't know we were going to talk about this part, or I would have told you the name of the hymn. But the hymn was about trials and hard times and hardships and faith pulling you through and all that. I didn't lay that thing in my yard. I don't know whose hymnal that was. You tell me. I know we were kind of a tourist destination because, see, I was such a smart guy. Don't laugh too hard, Corey. I mean, it didn't take very long to realize that we could just buy a tent, see, because the government told us we were going to get assistance pretty quick, and, geez, I could hang out with my daughter. Mobile should be 45 minutes away. Well, it was taking 4 hours because of damage to roads and bridges. And I waited in line for gas for 5 hours and paid twice as much for gas as you would, you know, that kind of thing. Well, I'm a smart guy, I told myself. So I'm so smart, I'll buy a tent. And we'll just camp out on the property. People say, yeah, you want to keep people from looting. I was looking for looters. Hey, you want come?
Actually, I wanted to ask you about that because I have a friend who was had to evacuate her house because of the wildfires, and it hadn't really occurred to me that you're leaving your house open to looters, and they were catching looters that were going in after the people had evacuated in BC. And so it seems to me that these natural disasters, they bring out both the best in people and the worst in people. Would you agree?
No question. No question. That was my next point. Absolutely no question. You see the very best. You see the very worst. No doubt.
And what determines what determines whether you're someone who it brings the best out in, or someone who it brings the worst out in? I wonder.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
What determines whether you're someone who the best comes forward within you when you're facing a disaster like that, versus the opposite?
Because we all have, I guess we all have a little bit of both in it. Well, we have both in us. It's which one do we act on, and how does that come forth? I mean, what turns a person from being a regular Joe walking down the street, even going to church on Sundays, quote unquote, living a relatively sober life, to, well, there's a big problem here. There's nobody living in these houses anymore. It's a field day. I mean, what did you see?
They say that there's never been born a bad child. But what happens? And all I can think of as you're talking, forgive me, it's one of those things that's been stuck in my head since grade school. Roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, and long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it had been in the undergrowth. That being the first stanza of The Road Not Taken, Robert Frost. Yeah. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I not knowing the one least traveled by. That deal. I don't know what causes that. I don't know what makes people self-serving instead of in the service of others. You talk about the anxiety of what's going on in the world today. You talk about these anxieties that you hear so much of. Try living in the United States right now.
Oh, I can imagine. And let's discuss that maybe a little bit when we come back after these messages. I do have to go to another break. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Lesley.
And Corey.
And with Corey.
And Alan.
Yes, and tonight we've been talking about really survival issues, facing death, and what happens to people when they face death. Whether it's someone who's been given a terminal diagnosis and they question their life choices and their life decisions, or whether it's somebody that's thrown into a natural disaster and has to cope in a way they've never had to cope before. Now, I believe Corey has a question from a listener.
Yeah, I have a question from Laura, and we never use the person's real name, so it's we'll call her Laura. And Laura says, and it's right apropos for our conversation, have you covered anything about the current state of affairs between NK and the USA, North Korea and the USA, and the world? For some time, I haven't been able to really see or be able to plan my future. Long before this conflict, and now all I see is emptiness and no electricity. That's an
excellent question.
Yeah, it's a sad one, though. It's a sad question.
It's very sad, and the only thing I can give you on that is, no, I haven't written about it. Do I think about it? Of course. I could make this a segue into my book, my second book that was released today, but I'll try to avoid that. But my second book that was released today is about how my family was at least partially connected to, there is a connection to the assassination of our president, John Kennedy, in 1963. What's the connection with your question, Laura, is part of that book talks about what our lives were like, what our times were like in 1963. I'd like to tell you I was a genius by then, but I was 7 years old, so whatever, But at 7 years old, by then I had already experienced being held in my dad's arms and looking up and seeing that thing moving and being told that's Sputnik. I had already experienced the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I will never forget as long as I live when, and if you're not familiar with Cuba, the missile crisis, the Soviet Union premier, and President Kennedy, spend a few minutes, take a look at that. The Missiles in October was a good documentary-type movie, as I recall. But it was a crisis situation, real-time. Fort Worth, Texas was, at the time, probably still is, a center of military aircraft building, missile building, railroads, transportation hub, Dallas-Fort Worth area. Dallas and Fort Worth are kind of like Minneapolis and St. Paul, or I'm trying to think of a good example of you guys. But anyway, 1960, what, two? Mm-hmm. And I can remember on TV seeing the map with the concentric circles, like ripples on a pond when you toss a rock in, of how long it would take the missile from Cuba to hit us. We at school had drills of, we had nuclear bomb drills, which I always wondered, why are we going in the hall and putting our tail between our legs? Hey, what's that going to do based on all the movies we heard? We had the sirens, we had the air drills, we had all those things. It's not now. The difference, of course, is, and I'm trying to be a good boy and be as apolitical as I can. But it's hard down here right now. It's difficult when you've got somebody poking the tiger and daring the tiger to turn around.
Your voice is breaking up.
You're breaking up a little bit.
There's different ways of being tough. And I don't know that telling somebody to shoot a nuclear bomb at you is the right answer, but that's not your question. Faith can come into play. I don't know what your beliefs are. I don't know what your, dare I say, metaphysics. I don't want to bring up a subject you guys are so much more familiar with than I am, but a lot of times peace comes through faith in whoever. I mean, somebody stop me if you need to. I believe in God and I believe in science, and I believe there's proof from both.
We believe in God and science too.
Well, it's like if I ever needed to know whether prayer worked or not, it was when I was diagnosed with the first cancer, and I was told I had a 30% chance of making it through a surgery, and I was told if you make it through that, you got a 30% chance of living 3 years.
Alan, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your voice has really been breaking up, so we really didn't hear very much. I know that you're talking about your cancer diagnosis, and it would be. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to share about that, but maybe I
Are
don't
we
know.
doing any better now?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I renegotiated with my wiring here, so maybe I can do better.
Good.
I'll try.
Yeah. So we lost you at you had a 30% chance.
Well, you don't feel good one night, and by the time you get home, you really don't feel good, and you go and they say, "Oh, you got appendicitis." Oh, big deal. Everybody gets appendicitis. But you got to have an emergency surgery. Okay, whatever. All right, fine. And you come out of it, and the surgeon tells you, well, yeah, we got it. Oh, by the way, you had to have emergency surgery because it burst. Okay. She says, but there's something weird going on in there. Now, what is that?
Been there, did that. Got the T-shirt.
Was that a special class in medical school on how to break news? I mean, they did a laparoscopic surgery to get the burst appendix, but she says, but there's something weird going on. Come see me in a few days. I go see her in a few days. Well, I'm going to refer you to an oncologist. And I said, wait a minute. You must mean something else, because I thought an oncologist, aren't they like a cancer doctor? She said, yep. So it kind of went downhill from there. And one thing led to another, and okay, well, you're very interesting, very interesting, very interesting. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have appendix cancer, and it's very low incident rate. We don't see this very much, but the appendix cancer we got, but everything else is swimming around in there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so go see the expert. So the expert says, here's my card. If you just want to talk to somebody, give me a call. Huh? Well, see, this probably isn't going to turn out very good for you, right? Yeah, I give you about a 30%. There's 4 places in the United States that'll do this surgery. If you can get to one of those in time, then you got a 30% chance of making it through the surgery. And then if you do that, then I give you about a 30% chance of living another 3 years. Now, if you're lucky, it'll happen again and you'll get to do the surgery again, but the surgery is going to take a long time. So go to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. They say, well, it's going to take 15 hours. And anyway, they said, we think we can give you better odds than that. And I said, that's good. But, you know, when you're getting rolled into that surgery, yeah, okay, and we can all together now, let's say, yeah, but that's the case with every surgery. Yeah, you can get hit by a car when you're driving to the gas station. And somebody that lives in Las Vegas where I do, you know, we're eventually going to head if somebody doesn't cut me off. But, you know, yeah, you can say that every day could be your last one. But when somebody's told you what they told me, they're rolling you in and they're putting you under, you're reciting a lot of Lord's Prayers. Well, at my church, I wind up on the prayers list for a lot longer than I thought I should be on it. But, you know, that was 2010. Yeah, I still go to the Mayo Clinic. I still go. I'm down to about once a year. I have another kind of cancer as well, but it's being managed. But you can't control the nut job in North Korea. Ooh. You can't control, let's just say, any of the nut jobs involved in this situation that's giving you the anxiety. You can't control them. I don't know what your faith is. I mean, I'm on so many topics, I'm just not convinced I'm the only one of us that can be right. I think we may actually all be right, and I think religious beliefs are really high on that list for me. I'm a Protestant who believes my God is inclusive and that my God is tolerant. But I think I can believe in God and not have a problem with, I mean, I have a problem with organized religion, but to me, organized religion is not necessarily God. But I got no beef with Catholics or Hindus or Baptists or Mormons or Buddhists or Muslims or anybody else I left out. How can any of us who believe in any kind of God know for sure that everybody else is wrong? I don't know.
Oh well, that's just it. And that's what we talk about on the show quite a bit. It's about being spiritual, not religious, right? It's about
very, very well put.
It's about being uniform in the wanting to be better than you were yesterday, And we have certain beliefs that probably you wouldn't believe in, and you have beliefs that we wouldn't necessarily believe in. But who's to say? It's like somebody that comes up and tells me they're an alien, they're from outer space. Who am I to believe or not believe without proof? And if there is no proof, it's like the old joke about the Catholic or the Mormon are going to heaven and God's walking him through the corridor, so you have to be quiet when you walk by here because those are the Catholics and they think they're the only ones up here. Like it is what it is. But I really appreciate your, how do I put this? You have a certain zest about you. And I don't mean a physical zest about you. There's a certain energy that you're portraying that is really phenomenal. And I think our listeners, when they start listening to this on the podcasts and tonight on the show, are gonna look at things a little bit differently. And with today's, because we're actually, it's one of the topics we started looking at over the past couple of weeks. Dr. Lesley's been looking at doing world topics. We don't usually do them. But I think you're leading to doing a couple of shows on them.
Because people have been asking us to. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wind up the show.
Big plug for the book.
Yeah, so Alan, if somebody wants to buy your book or get in touch with you, what should they do? It has to be quick.
My website is alanlivingston.com. You can get me on Facebook at Alan Livingston. Or on Twitter is @_CA Livingston. I have a book out, just came out today, electronically, Intersection with History, How My Family Crossed Paths with JFK and Oswald. So I hope you'll look at my website, take a look at the books, and get in contact with me with any questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show, Alan. And
it's great.
Unfortunately, we have to go. So listeners will be back next week and with a new topic.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Lesley Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com. where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.